The penultimate race of the 2023 Formula One season will take part in Las Vegas, and it's the first time we've been here in over 40 years. That's right, Las Vegas previously staged 2 Formula One races under the Caesar Palace Grand Prix name back in 1981 and 82, but you're here to learn about the here and now, because this weekend could go down in history as one of the most disastrous Grand Prix in Formula One, or one of the best. So it's time to tell you everything that you need to know about this weekend's racing, and stick around to hear my predictions for the race. The Vegas Grand Prix will see 50 laps of the 6.201 kilometer track come Sunday. There are 2 DRS zones, but against the norm, neither are down the pit straight. The first is down to turn 5 and the second into turn 14. There are 17 corners completing the clockwise circuit, but a lot of it is basically flat out. Like, there are 3 kinda twisty parts spread out by some very big straights. I mean, turn 10 and turn 13 do exist, but modern day Formula One cars will take those effectively flat out, which made me think we saw what happened to a lot of the power units last time out in Brazil, especially as the wear and tear of a full season is starting to set into them. So I'm a little bit worried, with this being so high speed, the reliability of the cars will be a factor come race day. Pirelli have opted for the softest 3 in their range, the C5 soft, the C4 medium and the C3 hard. I do have my concerns that the lower temperatures, which we'll get to momentarily, plus the cars running lower downforce setups, similar to what we often see in Baku, there'll be a combination of cold brakes and cold tyres and long straights, which will surely lead to a lot of cars running out of grip when they enter those hard braking zones, especially into somewhere like turn 14, and therefore finding themselves in the barriers. If the cars are able to get around though, I imagine we'll see a one-stop race for the majority come Sunday, especially because the pit stop time is expected to be around 29 seconds, which is easily one of the longest pit stops of the season. However, as I mentioned, the team's biggest concern isn't making the tyres last as much as getting them up to temperature. Free practice 2, qualifying and the race are all projected to be under 10 degrees Celsius. Ross Brawn even came out and said Formula One did not take the low temperatures of Las Vegas into account when they initially put the plans together for the weekend. Add to that the complexity of wet weather running, which is likely to be on Friday during the free practice sessions on brand new tarmac laid for the Grand Prix weekend, and it could get very messy. The cold temperatures will lead to the track already being slippery, and then the teams will have less dry data to go off of come the Grand Prix. Before I get into my predictions, let's take a little look at the championships. With 2 races left to go, the top 6 looks fairly settled in the constructors' standings. Ferrari is still in the hunt for second place, but both they and Mercedes struggled in Brazil, and that gap has stayed pretty much constant recently. It's the bottom end of the table that looks most interesting, with Williams still holding on to 7th place, but AlphaTauri looking like a brand new team in the last couple of races, whilst Haas are changing up quite a few things this weekend, making one last roll of the dice not to be resigned to last place in the standings after a solid start to the season has kind of turned into a lot of misery for the Haas team. Whereas in the drivers' standings, the battles are continuing throughout. The battle for 4th place is really heating up after Fernando Alonso turned around his fortunes and picked up a podium in Brazil. Lando Norris has taken a big lead now over the Ferraris, especially as Charles Leclerc and George Russell are kind of being left behind at this point. Lance Stroll got himself back up into the top 10, but he's only 1 point ahead of Pierre Gasly, so the Frenchman will be desperate to get that back. Whereas towards the bottom end, with AlphaTauri's resurgence, Yuki Tsunoda's now up into 14th place. Daniel Ricciardo will definitely believe that he can get the better of Bottas and Hülkenberg, so it's all to play for from 14th down. However, with all that background being covered, let's get into my predictions. As my first winners from the weekend, as we're in Vegas, I'm going to gamble on Ferrari, which I know is quite a big gamble when the car is throwing itself into the wall on formation laps, but I do think this Ferrari package will have a few things working in its favour this weekend in Vegas. It's another street circuit like Singapore, where we saw Carlos Sainz take the victory, but also the colder temperatures will play into Ferrari's warm-up advantage. We often see in qualifying the car can set its tyres up quite well, even if come race day it goes through them a little bit quicker than the rest of the pack, but this tyre warm-up will massively help in qualifying and also help off the start line come Sunday's race too, as well as the fact that the Ferrari power unit is generally the best of the bunch in a straight line. I know it's quite close between the top 3, but going all the way back to Baku, we saw Charles Leclerc have a great weekend on a similar style of track, and I could see a repeat for the Monegasque driver, and to be honest, he deserves a weekend going his way. And I also think Williams is set up to have a good weekend in Vegas. Of course, they've shown they have a great car in a straight line. Albon's equal best finish of the season came in Monza, but I feel like it goes a little bit deeper than that. If we look back to Azerbaijan, Albon put together a solid race and finished in 12th place, when apart from Bahrain, that was his best finish of the first 8 races of the season, when the Williams car looked a lot less competitive than it does now, because post-summer break, Albon has been in great form. He finished in 11th place in Singapore, so just outside the points, but he has managed to get points in the Netherlands, Monza, Austin, and Mexico. So I feel like this weekend is set up for Albon to once again show why he's 13th in the driver's standings by a considerable margin. Moving on to my losers, and it's not often that I mention Red Bull in these videos, as I just expect them to nail it more often than not, and it's even less often that I mention them as a loser. I feel like this weekend could be a touch tricky for the Constructors' Champions. As much as Red Bull have a car that has been absolutely stunning this season, there is one blotch on the report card in Singapore where they just couldn't seem to get the car into the right window, and there are a lot of parallels between Singapore and Vegas, but the bigger reason I feel like they'll struggle is the tyre warm-up come qualifying and for the start of the race. We often praise Red Bull for their ability to hold on to their tyres because they get them into the temperature range required steadily, and that could actually play against them this weekend. Of course, they're still going to be quick, but I don't think it's going to be an easy display of dominance from Max Verstappen, and he may have to actually battle for his points this time around. Whereas Alpine just have a distinct disadvantage this weekend, being the only team powered by Renault engines, and the Renault engine is about 20 horsepower down on the other options, so the fact that the Las Vegas Strip will see the cars at top speed for a good portion of the lap plays massively against the Alpine power unit already. Add in the fact that because of the lower temperatures, we may see teams running their engines a little higher than normal, as overheating will be less of an issue compared to the last few Grand Prix. There are a lot of things pointing towards Alpine either being overtaken by the rest of the pack on the incredibly long straight, or causing a considerable DRS train through the midfield. So overall, I'm expecting Ferrari to have a good weekend thanks to their tyre warm-up, probably closing the gap to Mercedes, but not sure they'll be able to do enough to clinch second place from the Mercedes team, whereas Williams, and more specifically Albon, who have been in pretty decent form, will have a great weekend because they have that car that is so good in a straight line, whilst Red Bull will struggle with their tyre warm-up, meaning they may miss out in qualifying and possibly drop back a couple of positions off the start of the race too, whereas Alpine will struggle purely based on their straight line speed disadvantage thanks to those Renault power units. Which is why my podium has a Ferrari at the top of it. Charles Leclerc has had such a turbulent season this year, and much of it has been completely out of his control. But with qualifying being so important and the unknowns of the weekend meaning anything could happen, I think we could finally see Charles Leclerc shine in 2023. Max Verstappen has to be in there. Even on a bad weekend for Red Bull, he's able to deliver. Like we look back at Singapore as if it was an absolute nightmare. He finished in 5th. Most drivers would be more than happy with a 5th place finish. And then I'm going to throw Carlos Sainz in there as well. I think he's really kicked on in the second half of this season. When Ferrari has delivered him a car in the right place, he's more often than not delivered them results. There are so many unknowns when it comes to this weekend. I'm really hopeful that it will work out and we'll see some great racing come Sunday/Saturday if you're actually there in Las Vegas, especially considering Vegas wants us to race here for the next 10 years. But the negativity around the build-up does worry me. The effect that the Grand Prix has had on residents, the decision to use the strip as the center point of the Grand Prix, which means that Formula One has annoyed everyone from tourists to businesses trying to get this Grand Prix together, and the decision to actually race at night before really thinking about the repercussions on how that will affect the cars, which should be the most important thing in Formula One. That really does worry me too. But let me know your predictions for this weekend's Las Vegas Grand Prix in the comments down below. And if you want to know more about my major concerns surrounding the Las Vegas Grand Prix's future, I made a video which is right here. So click that link and I'll see you over there.